Now for our What in the World segment. We here on television news spend a lot of time and energy talking about terrorism. The week began with video released of another gruesome murder of an American by ISIS. Then Tuesday we saw the barbaric attacks in a synagogue in Jerusalem. The new Global Terrorism Index shows that terrorism is indeed on the rise around the globe. The index was prepared by the Institute for Economics and Peace, a non-partisan think tank that analyzed instances of terrorism across 162 countries between 2000 and 2013. It notes that since 2000, terrorism fatalities have increased fivefold, and in 2013, terror deaths were up by 61% from just the year before. But let's delve a little deeper. It turns out that in 2013, only 5 countries accounted for 82% of terrorism deaths: Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nigeria, and Syria. Not surprisingly, Iraq was the bloodiest country for terrorism in 2013, according to the report, as it has been for 9 of the last 10 years. But it might be more accurate to think of these countries as war zones, and these deaths as part of civil wars, deep-rooted struggles for power. That's very different from terrorism attacks in otherwise peaceful countries. The report finds that only about 5% of terrorism deaths since 2000 happened in advanced industrial countries. And over the last 5 years, a quarter of the deaths in those countries were at the hands of lone wolves, individuals with no terrorist group affiliation. So terrorist activity might be on the rise, but it is concentrated in a few places and done by a few groups. The report pointed out that just 4 groups accounted for 2/3 of the deaths from terror last year. The top killers are, as you can imagine, ISIS, Boko Haram, the Taliban, and Al-Qaeda. Now, while much of the jihadist hate speech is directed at the West, most of their victims are locals and Muslims. In fact, as an essay accompanying the index argues, most militant groups are actually in pursuit of, quote, relatively limited goals in local or regional contexts, unquote. Even ISIS, perhaps the terror group that instills the most fear in the West today, does not seem to emphasize, quote, totally abstract and utopian global goals, unquote. A sharp contrast to Al-Qaeda, according to the essay. So how should we combat ISIS and other terror groups around the globe? Consider this data from the terrorism report, which cites the RAND Corporation. Between 1968 and 2006, just 7% of terrorist organizations have been defeated through military action alone. So what has effectively quashed 83% of the terrorist groups that were defeated in that period? Local intelligence and police breaking up the groups on the one hand, and political engagement on the other. Either the key members of the group were arrested and killed, or they were somehow integrated into the political process. That is likely how it will end even in Iraq and Syria. Policing and political power sharing. By the way, for even more perspective, according to the new Global Terrorism Index, an American is 64 times more likely to die by homicide than because of a terrorist attack. And further, at least in 2012, a human being living anywhere in the world was 40 times more likely to be a victim of homicide than terrorism. So if you want to get scared, fine, but get scared about the shooting next door, not the terrorist group halfway around the world.